Everything is trying to be better than it was. You know, I made a lot of games before I finally sold my first game. Very hard to make Pac-Man.
Keep it simple, keep it small.
Everybody wants everyone to succeed.
And also it's never ending. What would be your recommendations for those who are starting out?
Juniors overcomplexify everything. And you just type code and save it and it loads it.
So what are some of the top skills you have acquired along the years?
Make stupid decisions. As a senior programmer, you're not doing anything. You put one game out for free, just give it away to people. Let them copy it and give it to everybody else. And then if they like it, they buy 2 other games.
Correlation between the Mexican cooking to the game.
If you are not done cooking it and you put it out, everyone's going to hate it.
When I was a little girl, my brother and I used to fight over the computer who's going to play those games first, either Commander Keen or Dangerous Dave. Fast forward to today, we are at the C3 Dev Festival, a leading software engineering event joined by the one who invented those games, John Romero, who's also the father of first-person shooters, Wolfenstein, 3D, Doom, Quake, games you've probably played or at least heard about. Being a completely self-taught programmer, designer, and artist, John is considered now one of the world's top game designers, with his work earning well over 100 awards globally. Romero's influence extends beyond gaming into pop culture, with Doom in particular being referenced in movies, TV shows, and even music. I am your host, and my name is Lirone Glikman. I'm a global business development consultant and an expert on business relationships and personal branding, and I'm so honored to interview John Romero. So let's start.
Hi, John Romero. How are you?
Great. Doing great.
It's great to have you here with us. And I want to ask some questions around lesson learned about game development and self-development and how to create products and games that turn the world around. So first question would be, what resources or strategies aided your self-taught journey in programming, design, and art?
The funny thing is that a lot of it was me playing other games. Back then, in the early 80s, it was hard to get books to learn anything from, but I did get a few critical books that were really important to learning how to program in 1982. So at Christmas of '82, I got 2 really important books that were really helpful. And then I like went to the next level the next year in 1983 because of these 2 books. But it was critical to have those books, otherwise there just was no way to learn what I needed to learn. But just continually creating stuff and learning how that worked, and then making something else that uses some of those things I've learned, and just kind of stair-stepping is basically how I got to where I'm at, just making game after game after game and trying new things constantly, and anything I could learn from outside as well.
So you self-taught yourself, and I'm sure that during this process there are some successes and also failures. And can you recount a game development failure that taught you a valuable lesson, maybe leading to some eventual success?
Well, geez, most of my failures were at the very beginning. You know, I made a lot of games before I finally sold my first game, and it was funny because it was almost like a formula to discover to sell that first game, and when I followed that same formula, I just started selling all of my stuff right after that, and it was a formula that only worked during that time in the '80s. Doesn't work today, has nothing to do with today's world, but it was like, just even knowing that I needed to discover a formula to do that was important. Like, what is the formula for the internet to make something, or free to play, or whatever? Just learning those things and running with them and just using them is how, like, to optimize success, you know, get better at that one thing. Yeah.
And then as internet evolved, you know, the business ecosystem was evolved. How did you get another formula, or how did you manage to cope with the change of the market?
Yeah, there was a lot of those. One of the early formulas for success was in the shareware market, which is you put one game out for free, just give it away to people, let them copy it and give it to everybody else, and then if they like it, they buy 2 other games. Two of the episodes that come with it that form a full story. And so that methodology of design worked for years. You know, that's how we made our stuff. We put something out for free, and it works today.
Yeah, the
Like
freemium, what we call freemium,
it's like
maybe.
freemium, yeah, it's free. It's so like freemium stuff. Even today, I'm making sets of levels I just put out there for free, but I also sell them in a box and as a download if you want high quality music, that kind of thing. Tons of people are buying it.
Amazing.
You know, even with a free thing. You know,
so you can definitely use this formula on different products, games, or others. And you started at a younger age. And what motivates your innovation in gameplay mechanics and ensuring your games stand out in the competitive market? So what is your motivation again along the years to keep doing this, to keep pushing it into the market?
Having a background as a programmer and a designer and all the other stuff that I do makes making games really interesting, because every one of those fields keeps progressing at crazy speed. So anytime I'm going to work on something, if I'm working in that a certain field of you know, for the game, like if I'm just going to focus on level design, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in level design. So it's very exciting to jump back in and use the new tools and new methodologies that are being used today to create levels. You know, it's totally different. It changes all the time. So because this whole industry is changing constantly on a daily basis, it's always exciting. Everything is trying to be better than it was. And when you get to use even better tools to make even better ideas, you know, I mean, how can you stop doing that? It doesn't stop, you know?
I mean, it's kind of like uses your creativity in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
Like it just, you have to be creative for that.
Yeah, you gotta be creative, and then like know the tools, know how to use the tools, try and think of what is the next thing people haven't seen, using those tools. And yeah, it all builds on top of itself. And it's like you making one game, you're already ready for the next one, you know?
So what are some of the top skills you have acquired along the years to be, again, at the top of your field? I mean, apart from the creativity, obviously, that you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, each field, you know, there are all these levels of you know, people start out as juniors, and they become mids, and they become seniors, and then they become principals because they've been doing it for so long. All of those steps, you learn so much. But at the top, when you become a senior, it's all about simplification, not having anything that's complex, but simplifying everything into its essence, where you just don't have to write that much, but it does so much, you know? And so the process has always been you kind of establish a baseline for like an idea, like what you're going to create. And then at that point, you're like, what are the things I need to do to make this happen at the minimum level, not at some very complex level, but just like at the minimum level, how do I get these things to happen, and does it need anything extra to polish it and make it even nicer? You know, and when you can design things that are simple but really effective, you can put a lot of them in and make your whole experience be really exciting. But if you're focusing on one thing too long and you're complexifying it, you don't have the rest of the game there, you know? So you have to like know how to do a lot at, you know, very, very fast, but also at a high level of quality.
And as you said, this is something that you gain over time through working with so many different...
By learning,
Exactly.
Learning
so you can look at something and say, okay, this is like the minimum, like
minimum
energy.
number of polygons that
Exactly.
this kind of a shape should have. Otherwise, it starts looking like 1995. You know, and it's like, you know, there's a lot of every single aspect of everything has detail orientation around it.
Exactly, and that's really like the specialty when it comes to your field.
Yeah.
Now, how do you perceive the future of gaming and technologies like brain-computer interface?
I don't know, you know, someday there might be a brain-computer interface for games. You know, I feel that like whenever that happens, it's going to be commonplace for people to have that kind of interface anyway. So that's going to take a long time, decades probably, before that happens. Before that happens, I think that we're going to have, you know, people are going to be playing in what's called spatial computing right now, where it's like VR, AR, you know, so we're going to see some more of those things. They'll be their own thing. They're not the same as like playing on a console or playing a PC game or whatever, or handheld, mobile, that kind of thing. It'll be its own style of game. But yeah, I think in the future, it's just like, better hardware comes out. Evolution of gameplay happens sometimes because there's new hardware to support it. As an example, the Switch was really great when it came out. It had some really neat abilities, like the ability to dock it and have it play on your big TV and the controllers in your hands, to separate the controllers off of it. There's all these things that it did, but when it came down to it at the end, it just needed a really great game, like Breath of the Wild. Like that's all it needed, you know, to make people just stick with that system and play the hell out of it. Because the world itself, like people hadn't really played a game like that before. That's what's exciting is yes, Nintendo made a game on a handheld. That's not world shattering at all, but the design of that game was. And that's what made it really interesting, and why so many people played it, and why they made a sequel and all that kind of stuff.
So it's also about like not only the technology, but also the usage and kind of give
It's
people
the design.
Design or yeah,
design.
like
People are playing the game because of the design.
Yeah.
People are not playing the game because you use JS Node to communicate to a backend server. Like nobody cares about that. They care about, like, you don't go to a movie because it's shot at 70 frames a second or something. Like they're going to see the movie because the idea or the actors in it are portraying a certain kind of character, and all this is all design, right? So it's the design that people care about. And so when you focus on the design, that's where you get really great results, you know? But in games, you focus on design coupled with really great technology.
And you know, there are so many obviously young junior developers that want to make it in the gaming world. What would be your recommendations for those who are starting out and want to create such impactful games?
Yeah, so especially if anybody's coming over from a totally different tech, like everyone at this conference is coming over. If they were coming over the game industry from this tech stack, I'd say start really simple. You want to start with something as simple as an SDK called solar2d.com. It uses the Lua language, which is about the easiest C-based language that exists. It doesn't impose anything on you like an IDE. It's just like a file of code and the window of the SDK, and that's it. And you just type code and save it, and it loads it. And it's like the simplest interaction with instant results, and you're programming in a very simple way. You're not doing like C++ with really complex function definitions and all that stuff. It's dead simple. Because what matters is what you're trying to put on the screen and trying to make. And that has nothing to do with complexifying like the process of putting together the code. It needs to be dead simple. Like I just type one line of code and you see graphics on the screen. And that's how it works, right? So you're focusing on the design and the tech doesn't get in the way. And so I would say use Solar2D as the SDK to put stuff on the screen and do networking and, you know, all the sound and all the stuff. And then just like focus on making something really small and just try to make it and finish it. You know, don't make a big thing. You'll never finish it. Make the small things.
Small, simple as you can.
Small scope, yeah. Keep your scope very manageable. Even if it's a Pac-Man game, it's very hard to make Pac-Man. If you can just make Pac-Man or Space Invaders or any of those games, it'll teach you so much about architecture of games and what it takes to like, oh, geez, these things can't move too fast. You know, like if you're making Space Invaders and it's like the characters are marching across the screen super fast, you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to figure out how to slow these things down now. And so you're just learning about how games are timed and everything.
So it's also about what do you want to learn in the process of building your game.
You're learning this stuff as you're building it and responding to like, oh, things need to be on timers.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a whole new concept. I got to figure out how timers work, you know?
So maybe even what you're saying, even like reverse engineering of like as a junior one, what do you want to learn at the end and then just choose a game to build that could, yeah, but keep it simple, keep it small.
Very simple, but if you start with a very simple SDK, then the whole process feels like it's supposed to be simple. When you jump into something that has a Photoshop-like IDE, you know, you're just like, where do I even start? Visual Studio, Photoshop, like those things are so big, Unity, Unreal, you load them up and it's like, okay, well, where do I even start in here, you know? But if you are starting with just a blank text file and you can type one line of code and save it and it shows something on the screen, you know that you're going to be able to get to your idea very fast, you know, and that's the thing that you care about anyway.
That's a really, really good point for those of you who wants to start, to start in the business of gaming. I like what you said about really like starting small, because sometimes it can really overwhelm you. Everybody does that. Juniors overcomplexify everything. It's because it's fun to do.
but that's not what you're doing it for. You know?
And like you said earlier, like when you're more experienced, you know how to look at it, like kind of know the end in mind. Exactly.
There's so much stuff.
That's the art.
Is it like programmers are always debugging, and the thing is, as a junior, you are just writing bugs as you're typing.
Yeah.
Like you don't even know it. You're just making bugs.
Yeah.
As a senior programmer, you're not doing anything like that. You're not making bugs. If there is a bug, it's because it was a dumb typo. It's not because there's actually a deep fundamental issue
that you didn't know about.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So seniors are really like, they're worth the money because they are writing good code constantly, and it's high-level code, you know.
So it saves a lot of hassle.
Saves a lot of hassle, you know.
On.
And we have a lot of seniors in our company now, so very few. We have no juniors really.
So John, we're going to move to some Blitz questions.
All right.
And the first one would be, if you could collaborate with any other game developer, live, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Wow. I would like to collaborate with Jim Nichols, because he made some really cool games in the early 80s, and I'd like to see what it'd be like to make a game in assembly with him.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The second one would be, what's your favorite game that you didn't work on, and what aspect of it impressed you the most?
Jeez, Ghost Recon Breakpoint. I love, obviously, shooters, but it's a third-person shooter, and I love sniping. Which is not anything that anyone's seen in my games before, is using sniper rifles, but I love it. I love it.
So that would be the one. So what impressed you the most? The fact that it wasn't a part of your games? What was impressive for you?
You mean in that game?
Yeah.
Well, the world itself looks beautiful, and I love the way the AI works. I love the fact that it's an open world, that as soon as you get close to a settlement, it now kind of enters slowly, like imperceptibly enters a new mode where you are now engaged in this entire place. And if you get killed, it knows that you are focused on it, so it spawns you somewhere around it again, and everything is different. So it's just such a good game. It's infinitely replayable.
So actually, my next question is going to be a hard one.
All right.
If you could only play one game for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Maybe Minecraft?
Minecraft.
Yeah. That's a hard one, but you can do anything.
You can stay there for a while.
Yeah, you can build computers in it. I mean, it's got so much depth. That's probably a good one. Yeah.
It will leave you there for a while.
Yeah, okay. I could live in Minecraft for a long time.
For sure. So noted. The next one would be, what's the most unexpected source of inspiration you've drawn from a game idea? So
from another game?
Yeah, I mean, or different source of inspiration. Obviously, we talked about the creativity aspect. So which world aspect, ideas maybe allowed you to create games?
Well, I'd say maybe even movies, like watching a movie, fashion, fashion does influence shapes and designs and stuff, because that's art.
It's still art.
And we're creating art, and we could be influenced by some of those designs that, like, you normally don't see those designs on people walking around normally. So, you could do that in the game if you're trying to, what if you're making a far future game and people look that way in the future? And so you can be inspired by high fashion. You can be, we were obviously influenced by Evil Dead 2 and Aliens when we were making Doom. It's a mashup of a bunch of different ideas together. So a lot of games are built on influences from all over, different types of media. Like H.P. Lovecraft is all writing, but we had so much Lovecraft in Quake. The whole vibe and the whole, all the creatures were Lovecraftian style creatures, and that's just from writing. So yeah.
They say also all kind of different arts and media can also
Everything is inspiration.
Exactly. Noted, and then comes to life through what you do.
Yeah.
Which is kind
of
exciting.
And how you combine it and reinterpret it,
And also it's never ending. Right?
It's never
so
ending.
many movies
People
and so many
are
niches.
always making books. Go to a bookstore. It's all new stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
never ending
nonstop.
Stories for bursts
on
of
top
creativity.
of your own ideas.
Exactly.
It's amazing. That's why creativity as a career is the best thing in the world.
It's also a diffusion of ideas. Exactly. Always things are coming on top of other things, and I think it's definitely keeps you very, very sharp.
That's why I'm still making games
exactly.
45 years later,
That's
right?
the key. That's the secret.
Yeah.
And another question would be, what's your favorite hobby outside of game development, outside of this?
Cooking.
Cooking. I remember that,
Yes.
by the way. So tell us about your favorite dish
So
to
I'm
cook
Mexican,
on.
so I just make Mexican food.
What's your favorite one to make?
Probably chili Colorado or tamales. Stuff that, like, if you go to a Mexican restaurant, a lot of times you won't find them on the menu usually, depending, especially in Europe, you're not going to find them.
It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's Mexican food is just typically, over in the United States, like in North America.
It's more adapted to the taste of the local, the locals.
But people really like it. In Ireland, people really, really like Mexican food. And I have an Instagram that's named Galway Mexican, Galway Mexican. And that's just all my food that I create. I just make it, take some photos of it. If it looks good, put it on there, tell people what's in it, But it's mostly about just like, here's a bunch of yummy stuff. And
what's your secret when it comes to the Mexican cuisine? Any what's your touch? Maybe
well, it's having that taste, is the taste of the food and how it should taste is just ingrained from growing up eating it all the time and seeing my grandma make it and everything. So it's like just having that, I don't even know what you would call it, but it's just like just knowing what it's supposed to taste like. And so when you're cooking, you know what you need to put in to get that same exact taste.
The original kind of.
Yeah, you have to know where. Yeah, this is like actual from Mexico, And so I grew up.
The authentic experience.
Exactly, the super authentic. And I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which was the very first UNESCO World Heritage City of Gastronomy because of the Sonoran Mexican food.
Wow.
So the Sonoran Mexican food in Tucson is the best food in the world as far as I'm concerned. It's insane. The amount of food there is crazy. The amount of restaurants, Mexican restaurants, is just, you can't even understand how many. There's too many, and so to survive, they sell hot dogs on the side of the street.
Yeah.
Like you'll go to like a convenience store, someone is cooking Mexican food on a half-barrel barbecue they just threw outside. Yeah. They have nothing to do with that convenience store, but they're in the desert because the desert's all everywhere. Yeah. So like on the edge of the desert, they're just selling hot dogs right there or steaks or whatever,
But I have to say also cooking is also about creativity. It's also an art. How to take different ingredients.
It's all refining.
And exactly.
Like you hone in on the taste you're looking for.
And also the design.
Yeah, of course, the plating and all that stuff. But you want it to look good, but you want it to taste good. And the taste is so critical to get those like what you're putting in it to make it taste that way. And I rarely ever measure anything. Like I just,
you feel it.
Yeah, I know how much to put in. Like if I'm gonna make masa for tamales, there's no measuring how much water or masa. You just throw it all together, and you're looking for consistency. The consistency is all that matters because then you have the mixture right. Or making tortillas, making flour tortillas. Like you just need to know the consistency of the dough, and then you're good to make them.
What do you think the correlation between the Mexican cooking to the game?
It's the same thing. It's all the same. It's like, what are the ingredients to make this game? What does it take? And to make a really good game, And it's like, you got to find the right ingredients and put them in the right way. And, the cooking is how long it takes to make it. And then when it's done, because you spent enough time on it, then it's great. If you are not done cooking it and you put it out, everyone's going to hate it. Right? So that's why my motto has always been, it's done when it's done.
Yeah, it's done when it's done. Well, I have to say that I love Mexican food. I also like spicy food. So you got me.
All right.
You got me into it more. I want to move on to a few questions that our audience actually addressed to you.
All right.
So what differs C3 out of typical tech conferences in your view?
Well, the fact that the focus is on creativity here. This is like obviously a massive code conference, which is great because everyone's using code to do something. And the great thing is that there's a focus on creativity using code. And that's what my whole life is, right? My whole life has been this, using code to be creative and to make something really, really fun. And the funny thing is that you know, there was a cool demonstration of how like all the cell phones would start making sounds, and it's making a song in the room.
The orchestra, smart.
Yeah, and that's creative. That's a super creative concept that is not technically hard to achieve, but you needed that concept or you never would have seen this before, right? The technology has been there for so long to do that. It could have been done decades ago, but it wasn't because no one had that idea. And it's those ideas that are the most important part of everything, because there's so much tech that can do everything nowadays. But it's like, what do you want to do? And so it's the same thing with making games. It's like, what do you want to do? What kind of game do you want to make? And as far as I'm concerned, what I'm going to make games, it's almost on a daily basis could change. You know, and there's some point where you're going to really do it. And then when you really do, you have to then solidify those concepts to actually start making that thing. You have to take all the things that could have changed on a daily basis and go like, but what really matters out of all of those days, what are the most impactful ideas that could actually work together in one thing? And because you're going to work for years on that idea, you do not want to make stupid decisions, right? Because at the very beginning of any of these, making something really big, I look at it as you're pointing off into the future for years, and any variance at the beginning off like this changes the angle, and your error is way off, right? Way off at that distance in time. So you're always trying to minimize error and keep that angle straight, and like always, but you have to respond to everything when you're making a game because things change all the time. So you have to be agile and you have to respond when you might be developing something and then somebody else comes out with something that has some aspects of it and everybody hates it because they released it and it's like, okay, do not do that thing. Let's take that out of the game. But like, if that was core, how do we reform it into something different that is not recognizably that? You know, so it's
always being alert and
responsive.
Responsive.
Yeah.
So you know, if we're going back to this C3 and the creativity, it's also a festival. Like, have you been to the karaoke last night?
No, I wasn't here last night.
Okay.
But yeah.
There is a karaoke one today.
Nice.
And I work with so many developers, and I really enjoyed seeing them, you know, if it's dancing and singing, and there was something very connecting in this sense. So what do you think of this format of having a festival-like setup of a tech conference and festival and music?
It's really cool. The funny thing is, like, if you go to game dev conferences that are like indie-based, they do everything. You know, like people have gigantic screens outside playing games together on giant screens. They have like brand new hardware that they just made that will take 8 people to play on 2 sides, a screen with 2 sides on it. And you have 4 people on both sides against each other on these giant screens. There's so much cool stuff that happens at indie game dev conferences.
And how do you see that impacts their networking, the ability of developers to connect more in such events?
Yeah. Networking, ideas, you know, so many. Yeah, I mean, you go and you see brand new things that are like, they have such a good idea that they need to be immediately released because you just showed a lot of people an idea. And if you don't release it first, someone else will, right? And that's happened many times where you, like, when you talk about ideas or you show ideas to people, if they're really impressive ideas, people can run with it and make their own version of it, you know. And that's something that even back in the early days when I was making games like Doom and Quake and all that, we'll tell anybody any information they want. I can tell them how we're making the engine. I can tell them the game that we're making, and they won't. If they decided to take my idea, it will not be the same game when they make it because everybody interprets everything differently and they develop differently.
So it doesn't threaten you in any way?
It's zero threatening, right? Especially because of having an endless well of ideas. I'm not worried. Go ahead, have that idea. I got a million other ones, you know. Yeah.
you know
it's
your
nonstop. It's totally nonstop. You can have that idea. I've told people lots of ideas. If you can make it, good luck. You know, it's hard to do anyway. But there's no reason why you wouldn't help somebody else develop. I mean, that's why we moved to Ireland, is because everybody wants everyone to succeed. It's not because everyone's against everybody else.
And I think that's a great approach to life and to business. You know, it's not like I'm in competition, but how can I
open
support,
source,
exactly, open source and
open
support
source
people
and
to,
sharing information.
yeah,
These conferences where people can get together and they network and talk. Like there was a person that I was just talking to a bunch of people for a while, and somebody there wanted to get into game dev. They want to know how to do it, and I was like, you need to network, start doing game jams together with other people. Like
game
find people
jams.
that are very passionate, that want to make stuff together with you, so you don't have to do everything. If you can find a good team of people that work well doing a game jam, you're building a company. And that person started taking people's information right there to start working with them.
Good. He took it. He
Yeah,
took it
it's
like
just
the next step. I love it.
immediately, yeah.
Because this is, for example, one of the great reasons why people should come to conferences like this. Because if
Absolutely.
they either can meet people, but also take initiatives and really form people.
They can do it where everybody's at. Like these people are here. Why don't they do it right now?
Exactly. Exactly.
Don't wait for the next conference.
And what do you think are the main additional reasons to attend such conferences? From the one hand, you can form a team, you can form a company, and
You can, yeah.
What
I mean,
other reasons?
pretty much for anything
Yeah.
that you can think of. There's hiring. Like you can come here and run into people and go like, would you like a job? Or form a company together because there's this really cool new thing. Could you consult on my project? So many opportunities when you get out and you network with people who are on the same wavelength and want to do that. Like you're in the right place, and that's what conferences are all about: getting those people together, and everybody is on the same wavelength, and then people can make things happen.
Exactly, I agree with you so much. And also in this conference, so you have the festival, you have obviously the code, you have also the career and kind of even the soft skills. And could you share your thoughts on the career track and of the conference, like maybe focusing on content or impact as you see the career track in C3?
I think the exposure to people of what careers are possible is really important. To even know that you could do that, Like people were asking some advice about game dev, like what kind of careers are there, and it's like there are hundreds of positions, different types of positions in game development. That's not like I am a programmer of this, I am a Node.js programmer, or I am a JavaScript programmer, I'm a whatever backend programmer. It's like I am a graphics programmer that specializes in shaders and ray tracing. It's like very specialized stuff, and the game industry is full of specialization everywhere. Like people who write, the writers. Are you a narrative dialogue writer where two characters are talking to each other? Like there are people who specialize in all these different areas.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's massive. It's like the way you would
micro specialty.
Yeah, down to the specialization, even in the writing part. It's people who are artists, right? There's a need for specific artists who do storyboards, that know how to boil action that you're trying to describe into the right set of scenes that you can then cinematize, right? Make into a little movie. And so it's people who are describing, being able to have someone who is in narrative, writing the description of a scene, someone who can interpret the scene into a storyboard. That's an artist, right? That's a concept artist. There's concept art like today, as an example. Let's say we're going to make a level in a game, and it's going to have all these different locations. Let's say, pretend it's a carnival. We're going to make a carnival. We're going to have a Ferris wheel over here. We're going to have the haunted house over here. We're going to have this roller coaster, all these things. And you're going to get a concept artist to draw each one of them, because you need to focus on just the haunted house. I need to know what it looks like inside, because we're going to build it. So concept it. And so there are concept artists that for many years, since the beginning of, I'd say concept artists started somewhere in the mid-90s to late 90s. Started basically, they just are drawing this stuff on paper. It looks really, really good. Then became digital. And so the evolution of concept art came from needing people to have really great ideas, not the designer. As a designer, I don't need to have what it looks like be great. I'm not an artist, I'm a designer. So you let the artist who has really great ideas be the person concepting it. And they were doing this on paper, then they start doing it digitally. And now, when you're doing it digitally, you're not doing it in 2D ever now. You're using the same engine that the developer is using to create the full 3D scene that looks like it's a 2D scene. And it's like, oh, could you turn up the light in that scene?
It's much easier than...
And make it look from this angle, and they easily just like change the camera angle, relight the thing, and it looks like a painting, you know, but it's done in full 3D. And if you need, they can just deliver those entire files to you. If you need metrics or any information off of them, you just get them. So like the evolution of even concept art has come so far. There's some shops that will not hire anyone that can't do full 3D in a game engine as concept, you know?
Because from what you're saying,
incredible.
so you said there are so many different specializations and
for
roles,
every kind
yeah,
of role.
that you can also learn in such conferences about like how like there's so many ways to get into the gaming industry.
What things are
You'll
available.
Just, that's
and then you go like, oh wow, I like art, I like programming.
Yeah, I think it gives a lot of hope and like making it real. Like it's real for me to get into the industry because there's so much room for whatever I like to do. So I think that's a great tip for our viewers
and also
as well.
on really big games like you know, like an Assassin's Creed game that has 3,500 people making the game. That's a lot of jobs.
That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs. I had no idea. Wow, a lot of jobs.
Yeah, like Spider-Man 2, $352 million to build that game.
Do you think, I don't know if it's politically correct question, but do you think people are happier? People who work in the game industry are happier because they're working on games?
You know what? It depends on what their goals are and what they are allowed to do. Yeah. So some people might be like, I like the kind of work I do. I like having a 9-to-5 job, and I don't mind if my focus is on just this one specific aspect of the game. Some people are totally fine doing that because they're being creative, they're not working crazy hours, they're not responsible for success or failure of anything. It's just like, I'm doing a cool job and people love my stuff, and I made this character that everyone's gonna love, right? And then there's people who are in charge of an entire team who have to worry about people being there or not being there and what they understand and what they know. So it's a totally different role. And so, you know, there's just so many different ways you can be involved.
Exactly,
you know?
Which is, I think it's a great thing to know. And to get into this industry. And another question would be, what are your thoughts on the creativity and innovation showcased at this conference at C3? As a creative person, how do you view the creativity and innovation?
I think it's awesome to see the different kinds of creativity with audio, you know, with visuals, with connectivity. All the different ways that you can be creative using code, because really code runs everything today. And so like it's almost a foundational aspect of most jobs to know how to code. So even on our team, the people who are writers, the narrative writers, they're in the engine and they are visually putting in the text into the engine. It's not a text file anymore. It's not a spreadsheet. It's like they're in the game when they're entering their dialogue and all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's great because all the tools have evolved, so people can be excited about using new things. You know, as an example, a friend of mine has been a writer his whole life, and he wanted to get into the game industry again. He'd been in for back in the 90s. He wanted to get back in again. And he wanted to apply at this one company that was making something that might be interesting. And my wife told him, you should use Twine to show that you understand using modern tools to create narrative that's branching and multilinear and everything. And so he used Twine and he wrote a story that had all this branching and stuff, and he sent it in, boom, hired. And he wrote Life is Strange, if you know that game. He won a BAFTA, he won a Peabody, all this stuff because he's using tools.
Exactly.
He's using the latest stuff.
I think, the tools are inevitable today, but also about knowing the right tools, and definitely, this conference.
It gets your foot in the door.
Exactly.
Because like when you're looking at the landscape of what writers are applying, here's stacks of stuff to read. Oh, I can run this one. Like I'm running a game, the games that we make. Let's do that. We're going to run that guy's stuff. It works.
It's an enhancer, a booster.
We want that person.
Exactly, to deliver what you want. That's amazing. Yeah. Any final words you want to share with us about your experience here at the C3 conference?
This is a really great place to be for the whole picture of what people like to do. You know, code underpins everything, but also so does creativity, because you're not doing anything with code if you're not going to be creative with it.
Exactly. So. I think that's a great final line for us. So. Definitely, code has to be creative, and you mastered it. So thank you so much, John Romero, for being with us, and I appreciate this conversation.
That was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.